My name is Clay Derryberry, and I'm your MC for the evening, and I want to welcome you. We appreciate your coming. On a personal note, there's a group of folks who were here last year, and I was so kerfuffled by the events of the night that I failed to specifically mention them, but the folks with Crystal Air in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Taylor Neiman, his wife Crystal, yeah. They were here 2 tables, and I failed to mention them, and I mention them because, bless his heart, Taylor's willing to hire a poor old worn-out mechanic to work a couple of days a week, and I appreciate that. So we're really thankful to have them here again, and it's great to work for them. Want to direct everybody's attention to the silent auction. There are a lot of really top-notch items in that auction on those tables. There's one item that I will mention specifically. There is an album there. It's called Just Us, J-U-S-T, U-S. It's an old album. It is bluegrass, if you like bluegrass. It is special because if you look at the album cover, on the left in the witness box with a striped shirt is a guy named Max Burnett. And Max Burnett was inducted, I forget what year, but he is in the Hall of Fame. The guy up on the judge's stand with the guitar pointed like a rifle is my first cousin, Johnny Walker. So that album has been out for like 40 some odd years. So you might want to bid on that because it is really good. I did want to mention that. On your table there are cards. We'd like for you to fill those out if you would, and so we can have an idea about people who are here. And I particularly and specifically and passionately want to thank the Franks because they're what keeps this thing going and organize it. Ken and Gail, Scott and Jeff, and their wives, because they really keep things going. At this time, we will have the presentation of the colors.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
may be seated. Those were the ROTC cadets from the Tullahoma High School of Tullahoma, Tennessee. Give them another hand. It is my pleasure now to introduce to you Mr. Mark S. Cheney, President of the Board of Directors of the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame. Mark.
Well, good evening, and welcome to the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame Gala and Induction Ceremony. We're very happy that you chose to attend the only formal aviation event in the state of Tennessee. This is our 23rd induction ceremony, and tonight's 4 new inductees will bring the total membership to 94. If you're joining us for the first time tonight, we thank you for being here and hope you'll see what you've been missing and come back each year going forward. For those of you that attend every year, we're extremely grateful for your continuing support. The Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame Board extends a very, very special thank you to all of our sponsors, donors, and of course attendees. Your continued financial support enables us to host this annual event and continue our work as Tennessee's official state aviation Hall of Fame. The Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame is also the repository and archive for aviation history in Tennessee. Your support also helps fund STEM projects, scholarships, and other aviation education opportunities. And a very special thanks to the Nashville Metropolitan Airport Authority for being our event sponsor for the 3rd year in a row. Excuse me. I want to say thank you and welcome to reception sponsors Cirrus Aircraft and the Knoxville Airport, and inductee Albert Glenn sponsors Memphis International Airport and Westar Aviation of Chattanooga. Thank you to Coca-Cola Consolidated Incorporated, Wilson Air Center, Asia Flight Support, and Niswonger Foundation for your generous sponsorships. The Hall of Fame appreciates the support we receive from the other airports around the state, such as Winchester, Tri-Cities, and Smyrna. We also have a few folks here tonight from the Tennessee Aviation Association and the Tennessee Business Aviation Association, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals who are with us here tonight. We're very glad to see that last year's inductees are joining us tonight. And I always look forward to meeting and getting to know all of our sponsors and donors. The support from our sponsors is obviously very important, but to those of you who have purchased reserved tables, your support is crucial to this event. The expense of producing the gala continues to grow each year, and your support helps keep it a healthy fundraiser. Our entire board cannot thank you enough. Lastly, thanks to the many volunteers that help us with this event each year. Your help is greatly appreciated. There are many, many special people here this evening, but I want to recognize AOPA's retiring president, Mark Baker, because one of our own had a long and very special connection to AOPA. Our Aviation Hall of Fame founder, Bob Mentor, worked for AOPA for nearly 4 decades, doing governmental relations work for AOPA in 8 southeastern states. In fact, Bob worked with every president of AOPA has had so far, from a founding member, Doc Hartranft, until the early stages of Mark's now 11-year tenure as president. Bob was Mr. AOPA in the Southeast for nearly 40 years of AOPA's now 85 years serving general aviation. And Mark has served as one of only 6 presidents in the association's 85-year history. I'm sure that many of you here this evening may not know about Bob's career contributions to aviation. Thank you both for your work in the general aviation field. I want to remind everyone like Clay about our silent auction over on the right side of the room. The purchases of these items help us continue our work, and the auction will conclude 15 minutes after tonight's ceremony. We want to thank Governor Bill Lee, the state legislature, and other elected state officials that support the work of the Hall of Fame. Governor Lee's letter is in your program, and it welcomes you and recognizes our inductees. And of course, tonight's program will begin right after dinner. But my final comments tonight are about our World War II veterans. Like myself, many of you have parents or grandparents who served in this war, and we all grew up hearing their stories, many of which are lost forever. Each year, there are fewer and fewer of these individuals that are still with us. Tonight, we have the privilege of honoring one of these heroes with the Defender of Freedom Award. I'm going to ask my fellow board member, Scott Franks, to come up and introduce you to our honored guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. Once again, I welcome you to our gala tonight and also want to congratulate each of our inductees. It's been my honor to work with each of you over the last 6 months or so as we prepared for tonight's events. As Mark mentioned, we're presenting tonight a Defender of Freedom Award, and it goes to one of Tennessee's native sons, Major John Luckadoo. Before I ask Major Luckadoo to come up, I want to share some rather amazing information about him and why we're honoring him tonight and how he truly lives up to his nickname of Lucky. Next summer will mark 80 years since the end of the World War II, so the vast majority of that generation are no longer with us, but Lucky is here tonight at age 102. To begin, let's go back in history. (1940), some 84 years ago. So after being born and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Lucky Luckadoo graduated from Chattanooga City High School and enrolled in the local university that fall that we now know as UT Chattanooga. Although the United States had not yet entered the conflict we now know as World War II, most of the rest of our allies were already engaged in battle with the Germans and the Japanese across the globe. Lucky and his friends were constantly hearing the news about the conflicts half a world away and knew it was inevitable for the United States would soon join the war. Lucky and his childhood buddy Sully wanted to be pilots. At that time, the U.S. Army Air Corps, the predecessor to what we now know as the U.S. Air Force, required that you have 2 years of college to be a pilot. However, Lucky and Sully found out that the Royal Canadian Air Force would allow you to join with no college requirement. So they devised a plan. They were going to join the Royal Canadian Air Force, get their pilot's training, and maybe someday they could transfer back to the U.S. Army Air Corps. The only catch was they found out they were under age 21, and the Royal Canadian Air Force required you to have parental consent if you were under 21. So next, they departed on a sales mission. They had to get their parents to allow them to join. So Sully was the only child, and his father had died from a mustard gas exposure in World War I. They went to his mom first, and she reluctantly gave her blessing for Sully to join. So next, they approached Lucky's mother. She gave her blessing, but said he had to convince his father. Well, when they approached Lucky's father, he told him it was the most harebrained idea he had ever heard, and Lucky needed to get his butt back in college. So Sully goes off to join the Royal Canadian Air Force, and Lucky has to head back to college. However, that would soon change. As we all know now, less than a year later, the attack on Pearl Harbor propelled the United States into World War II. There was a sudden great need for pilots. The Army Air Corps dropped their 2-year college requirement, and Lucky signed up as an aviation cadet in February of 1942, just before his 20th birthday. Lucky completed his pre-flight training at Maxwell Airfield, now called Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. Then he moved on to primary flight training in the Stearman at Avon Park, Florida. Next, he moved to Shaw Field in Sumter, South Carolina to fly the BT-13 Valiant. And then moved on to advanced multi-engine training in the twin-engine AT-10 at Moody Field in Valdosta, Georgia. Newly pinned with his wings, then Lieutenant Luckadoo was assigned to the newly formed 100th Bomb Group in Kearney, Nebraska, to fly the B-17. The 100th had just been formed a few months earlier, and its crews had already been in pre-combat training for many months when Lucky and his fellow new pilots were added to the rolls. They were suddenly dumped into the right seat of a four-engine aircraft. They had never flown. They had no experience in any four-engine aircraft. And Lucky stated that he's only had about 20 hours of flight time in the B-17 when they headed to Europe. This next picture is a picture of Lucky and his crew. As many of you may know, the 100th Bomb Group would become known as the Bloody 100th due to the losses it would suffer in the skies over Europe. If you watched the recent miniseries Masters of the Air, that was the story of the 100th Bomb Group. And Lucky was right in the middle of all of it. If you've not yet watched it, I urge you to take the time to do so. Lucky served as a consultant on that miniseries as well. So Lucky was in the inaugural group of the 100th Bomb Group. They completed their stateside training, such as it was, and headed to Europe in June of 1943. The 100th Bomb Group arrived at their base in Thorpe Abbotts, England, in southeast England in June of 1943 and became fully combat operational about 2 weeks later. From its first missions, the 100th Bomb Group's missions were primarily concentrated against German airfields, submarine facilities, and heavy industries in both France and Germany. The pilots and crews of the 100th Bomb Group endured hours-long missions in unpressurized aircraft flying at 25 to 30,000 feet, temperatures in the negative 50 to negative 60 degree range, all while fighting off very experienced German fighter pilots and barrages of anti-aircraft fire. During this time that the 100th Bomb Group was involved in many of the epic missions over Germany, France, Holland, and other countries controlled by the Nazis, this was during a time period that bomber squadrons had little to no fighter support due to the lack of range on the fighters available at that time. All right, pretty amazing, right? Among its many missions, the 100th Bomb Group is involved in the horrific week of October 8th through the 14th, 1943, known as Black Week. As Lucky mentioned, or was mentioned in the video, on Tuesday of that week was the Bremen mission. And that's the 100th sent out 18 B-17s, but only 6 returned. On Wednesday, they sent out another 18 B-17s, only 9 returned. On Thursday was the Munster mission. 100 was only able to put 13 B-17s in the air, but only 1 returned out of the 13. And that was flown by Rosie Rosenthal again, if you may remember from being depicted in the Masters of the Air series. On that Thursday, the 8th Air Force lost a total of 60 bombers in one day. So let me share a few other statistics with you right quick. In 1943, the life expectancy of a B-17 crew member in the 100th Bomb Group was only 11 missions. Over the course of the war, the 100th Bomb Group flew a total of 306 missions, which made up 8,630 sorties. They dropped nearly 20,000 tons of bombs. They had 757 men either killed in action or missing in action, and 923 taken as POWs, and they lost a total of 229 B-17s. Can you imagine facing that day after day after day, trying to get in 25 missions? So as was mentioned in the video, there were constant replacement pilots and crew members joining the 100 throughout the war, but of the 361 original 100th Bomb Group members, 276, or 77%, became casualties of the war. Most of these were lost in the first 4 months of duty in Europe. During his time in the 100th, Lucky served as a co-pilot, pilot, command pilot, and operations officer. As was mentioned, on February 13, 1944, he completed his 25th mission and soon was able to rotate back to the States. He was a ripe old 22 years old. He then served as a B-17 instructor, then transitioned to the B-29, and was preparing to deploy to the Pacific when the war ended. And also, as mentioned, of the 40 pilots in Lucky's class, only 4 survived to complete their 25 missions. This is a list of the missions that Lucky performed during his service. As you can see, they're ranging from June of 43 to February of 44. The name of the aircraft he was on, the date, and the target that they were headed to during that time period. This is a photo of Lucky in February of 1944 when he completed his 25th mission. I must also add that Lucky is also a recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross, the highest award for aerial achievement. Earlier, I mentioned that Lucky's best friend Sully, and I wanted to share a little more information about him. As I told you, Sully did join the RCAF in February of 41. He did complete his flight training and flew Spitfires, first in North Africa and then in England. While in England, Lucky and Sully's bases ended up only being about 30 miles apart, and they were able to reconnect in the fall of 1943 and spend a few days together. Sully even flew his Spitfire over to Lucky's base one day, and Lucky was able to take him up in a B-17. Sully then urged Lucky to take his single-seat Spitfire for a flight, and Lucky did, something he later called a big mistake. But he did get it back on the ground successfully. On the morning of November 8th, 1943, Lucky took a B-17 out on a test flight after maintenance and decided to drop in to visit Sully at his base. Upon landing at Sully's base, Lucky saw the wreckage of a plane smoldering next to the runway. When he spoke to the base commander, he learned that smoldering wreckage was Sully's plane. The afternoon before Lucky's visit, Sully had lost power on takeoff in a Hawker Typhoon and crashed on the airfield and perished on November 7th, 1943. To further illustrate our honoree tonight, I want to share this quote. He stated, "We were young citizen soldiers, terribly naive and gullible about what we would be confronted with in the air war over Europe and the profound effect it would have on every fiber of our being for the rest of our lives. We were all afraid, but it was beyond our power to quit. We volunteered for the service, and once trained and overseas, we felt we had no choice but to fulfill the mission assigned." Following the war, Lucky continued to serve through the transition of the Army Air Corps into the United States Air Force until 1948, at which time he resigned his commission to be able to return to college. He completed his degree in Denver, then spent a career in real estate development in Denver and Dallas before retiring in 1987. For about 50 years, Lucky never shared his memories of flying with the 100th Bomb Group, not with his family or anyone else. However, for the past 30 years or so, he's been more welcoming to the opportunities to share his views and experiences with our younger generations. As Lucky shared, "I loved flying and I still do, but I did not always love the memories that came with it. Being shot at while at the controls of a B-17, those were not the happiest of days. It was a period in my life that was compartmentalized. It was a chapter where I experienced terrible things, saw many terrible things happen, and I was very grateful to have survived it, but it was nightmarish to try and recall it. I wanted to forget it. I really wanted to forget it." The plaque we're presenting to Lucky tonight is the Defender of Freedom Award. This award is given in recognition of your courageous service in flying 25 combat missions through the perilous skies of Nazi-occupied Europe in a B-17 Flying Fortress to defend freedom from the tyrannical forces of the Third Reich during World War II. Please join me in welcoming to the stage to accept this, our native son of Tennessee, Major John Lucky Luckadoo.
Thank you all. Thank you very, very much. I can't tell you how really delighted I am to be here. Actually, I'm delighted to be anywhere, but to be among fellow airmen, to be back in my native Tennessee, and to be so honored and recognized for my service during World War II. As the PowerPoint presentation depicts, we were terribly young. We became actually accidents of history, serving our country, answering the call to defend the freedoms and the values which we hold so highly and cherish so dearly. When I got on the lecture circuit almost 30 years ago, speaking to all types of groups, but most particularly to the younger generations, and reminding them, or at least educating them, the debt that they owed to those who had provided the freedom that we all enjoy today. And I can't tell you how extremely proud I am to have served and survived, defending the freedom that is so dear to us that we must honor and respect and dignify. I recall vividly when I got to the point where I told my dear wife of 71 years that I was sick to death of hearing my story. I'd repeated it so many times in so many different ways that I was tired and I was going to quit and hang it up. And she looked at me and she said, "You can't. You have an obligation and a duty to remind successive generations of the debt that they owe to their forebears, or they wouldn't be here. None of us would be. And so I stand before you proudly as a survivor, not a hero, but a survivor of those of us who have been called and answered the call to proudly serve our country in a time of need, and to remind those of successive generations that they too may be called upon to do likewise. But I can't tell you how appreciative I am of this honor that you have recognized me on this occasion, and I accept it with humble pleasure. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And may God bless America.
Hold on just a second, I'll help you down, just a second. One other thing to add, Lucky's story is chronicled in the book you see here, Damn Lucky, and we have 2 hard copies and 2 softback copies. on the silent auction table tonight. If you are the successful bidder, he will personally autograph it to you. So bid high and bid often. All right.
Here's the plaque.
Yep.
You want to show everybody?
Yep. Move the plaque. You get a photo right here. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, if you would, bow your heads while we bless this food. Dear Father in heaven, hallowed be your great and good name. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this night. Thank you for Mr. Lucky, and we're thankful for this food. We open pray that you'll bless it, nourishing our bodies, and continue to help us through the evening. In Christ's name, amen. Because I fly, I laugh more than other people. I look up and see more than they. I know how the clouds feel, what it's like to have the blue in my lap, to look down on birds, to feel the freedom in a thing called the stick. Who but I can slice between God's billowed legs and feel them laugh and crash with his step? Who else has seen the unclimbed peaks, the rainbow's secret, the real reason birds sing? Because I fly, I envy no one on earth. And so we begin to honor those who have given all of their lives or big parts of their lives to aviation and to flying. But first of all, I was caught by the arm over here by Mr. Cunningham. He tells me he's 90 years old. And he said, I want you to tell Mr. Lucky that no matter what he says about himself, he is a genuine hero. And I say amen. And we are honored to be in his presence and honored to have him in our presence. And so we will begin. Our first honoree is Amanda Farnsworth. Now, how this is going to work is I will read the bio as presented to me about her. And when I'm finished with that, I will ask her to come to the podium, and I will ask her husband, Bob, to come forth and to hang the medallion around her neck. And what we're going to do is, when he comes up here, I will meet them in front of this podium, and he will install this medallion on her right here in front of everybody so everybody can see. So does everybody understand that? Okay. A native of Winchester, Tennessee, Amanda Farnsworth is paving the way for the next generation of women in the aviation industry. As a young girl, she developed a deep passion for airplanes, but the role of a pilot was viewed to her family as a man's job, and she was frequently told, little girls don't fly airplanes. However, that little girl held on to her dream. Amanda attended Vanderbilt University, earning a bachelor's degree in mathematics and a master's degree in computer science. She then began her career with International Business Machines and later with J.J.B. Hilliard, W.L. Lyons, now Baird Investment, becoming a top corporate executive. At age 40, she decided to fulfill her dream of becoming a pilot. Since then, she has created a blueprint for women in aviation. In 2018, Amanda became the first female owner pilot to earn a Vision Jet type rating. She is the first private female pilot to fly to Havana, Cuba since the Cold War. and she recreated the transatlantic flight route of female pilots in World War II to benefit STEM education. Amanda has made it her lifelong mission to mentor and inspire the next generation of women in aviation. Amanda serves as a member of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association Board of Trustees, whose mission is protecting the freedom to fly. She has worked to implement AOPA's aviation TEM curriculum in high schools nationwide, bringing awareness to the dynamic roles in the aviation industry that are needed, from mechanics to air traffic controllers. Amanda is a pillar of the Middle Tennessee community and serves her community via numerous boards. One role is her appointment to the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority in 2012. She has served in numerous roles in the MNAA board for over a decade, including chairing the Finance Committee, the Audit Committee, and being elected as Vice Chair and later Chairman of the board. Amanda's leadership on the board shaped one of the most pivotal times in the history of Nashville's International Airport, the creation and implementation of Aviation, a $1.4 billion expansion and renovation program designed to meet the exponential growth of Music City. For her exemplary service and contributions to aviation in Tennessee, our nation, and the world, Amanda Farnsworth is enshrined in the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame this 26th day of October, 2024. Ms. Farnsworth. And if her husband, Bob, will come forth. And that's all right. And she also receives a plaque, which is a miniature of the one here in front, and a little box for your medallion.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Now you can speak.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Clay. I'm incredibly honored to be here with all of you tonight, but it's pretty impossible to follow Lucky. Wow. Not sure where he is. But as my dad, my 90-year-old dad over here, Mr. Cunningham, said it best, you are a hero. So when Ken and the Hall of Fame board were discussing the format of the evening, they told each of the honorees that we would have 15 minutes to speak about ourselves. Whew. I quickly responded that I couldn't possibly fill up 5 minutes talking about myself, but as my husband is oh so quick to point out, get me with another pilot and it may be a long night. So let me begin by thanking Doug Cruelin and the beloved Nashville International Airport for nominating me, and the Tennessee Hall of Fame Board for selecting me. What a lovely event, and I am truly honored. Also, thank you to all of you who have come out here in support of aviation. I look out into this group, and my guys are sitting over here, and I look out into this group and I see many people who have touched my life. I see longtime BNA board member and past chair Bobby Jocelyn, who was my daughter's first flight instructor, and who I had to warn my daughter about his potentially foul language before they went up on their first flight. Oh yes, you all are laughing that know Bobby. I see one of my first flight instructors, Major Phil Harden, and many in my Cirrus journey like Joe Peterson and Evans Hood. I see people like Southwest Captain Dave Dickinson and my friend George Reenstra, who was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam and later flew Ronald Reagan. They've come here from Florida, all because they love aviation. Then I see women pilots. One in particular, Melissa Lambert, who's gone from private pilot to captain in just a couple of short years. Most of you also remember our late Governor Winfield Dunn. We lost him just a few weeks ago. And what you may not know is that his precious wife, Betty, is here at age 95. Sorry, Betty. And she is a pilot. She got her license, yeah. How about that? She's also a third grandparent to my daughter, Alexandra, who just got her license this summer. Yay! Lastly, there are many faces who have just been there when I needed some support, like my parents and family and cherished friends. The list goes on. So, as Clay told you earlier, I've wanted to fly airplanes since I was a little girl, but I was always told little girls don't fly airplanes. I always wondered why, but it never stopped the dream. So after going to college and graduate school and getting started in my career, the dream never left. When I met my husband, I warned him early on that I wanted to fly airplanes. He hated the idea. He knew I was a little strong-willed and said, if you do it, just don't tell me about it. I can't take it. So after many years in the investment business and finally even having a child, the itch just got worse. I decided at 40 years old, if I'm going to do it, I better get going. So one day, I left the office at lunchtime, drove to John Tune Airport, where I had an intro lesson scheduled in a 1964 Cessna 172. I went into the FBO, and they sent me down the field to a small rickety hangar that we are all very familiar with to meet my instructor. Of course, I walked in a white suit, pantyhose, and heels, and needed a place to change. So I asked where the ladies' room was. They sent me down the hall to the back corner where there was a little 4x4 bathroom, hardly large enough for a potty and a sink, but it came complete with the wet floor. Again, every pilot in this room knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, there I slithered out of my clothes without touching my feet to the floor and into my tennis shoes and jeans. And that day my world changed because I wasn't turning back. This secret television show happened several times before coming home to my husband one evening and finding him very proud of himself. He was holding a Forbes magazine that had an article about an airplane that had a parachute. He was so excited. After many years of his telling me, if you have to fly, please just don't tell me about it. Of course, I had to break the news. Anyway, life's never been the same. During all these many years of flying, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to be a part of the foundation of the B&A vision and putting together the world-class airport that we enjoy, as well as getting John Tune back on its feet after the tornado and planning for its future. I've also been so fortunate to be on the AOPA board for over 12 years, where we are protecting the freedom to fly every day. Our aviation high school programs have been in over 1,400 schools and have touched over 100,000 students across the U.S. and Guam. It's fantastic. Thank you, Mark. My passion, as many of you know, is working with young pilots, especially female pilots, and the numbers are changing. I laugh about when I used to fly into airports in the early 2000s and people would look at me like I had 3 heads. I remember early on flying to an Ole Miss and Vanderbilt football game where we picked up friends in Memphis and the men drove the tailgate provisions down to the Grove while the other mom and I, along with our 2 daughters, flew the plane down. When we landed, it was really busy and the linemen marshaled us over to park, and you know how the Cirrus doors opened up, and back in early 2002, there weren't very many around, so doors opened up and they were looking, and I thought they were looking at the plane, and finally one of them looked at us and said, "Who flew that plane?" So it was fun. Anyway, things have changed since then. It was really interesting though, as late as 2017, things hadn't changed outside of our country. I had the opportunity in 2017, when a small window opened, to fly into Cuba, as Clay just mentioned. It was so fortunate to be there, When my girlfriend and I landed, a very, very surprised tower controller gave me taxi instructions to the FBO and warned me to give way to the donkeys who were mowing the grass near the taxiway. When we girls arrived at the FBO, there were a whole host of linemen and guards approaching the plane, and some of them had guns, and we were scared. And I opened the door of the plane, and all of a sudden I heard, "Mujeres, mujeres." That means women, women in Spanish. They had never seen women pilots before. So we know that things have changed here, and they're finally changing everywhere. Now, of course, we have female controllers, female pilots, and female mechanics, and it's just fantastic. Aviation is the lifeblood of many industries, protects our country, and fuels economies. Look at what BNA has done. I have a few pictures here of the progress. That's the inside. I don't know how many, and the new inside through the security gate. And then the outside, it's just beautiful. We didn't have a good one of the hotel over the side, but you all get the idea. It's just fantastic. So, aviation is also just plain fun, and no pun intended. So before I close, I thought you might enjoy seeing this short video. So Mark Baker, as we've mentioned a couple of times tonight, is the CEO of AOPA, and he is here with us from Washington, and he has done the unthinkable. Thanks to him, President Biden, the House, and the Senate all finally agreed on something. They agreed to close Reagan International for 2 hours this past May in order to showcase AOPA's 85th birthday and the history of aviation. Honestly, it was the thrill of a lifetime. Flying right seat and running the radios in the videos is Todd Simmons, who is the president of Cirrus, and he's unable to be with us tonight as he's with most of the Cirrus crew at our annual Converge conference. We're so excited to be here to celebrate AOPA's 85th anniversary, flying this beautiful Vision Jet along with 60 other planes over the most restricted airspace in the world. In the plane with me today, Todd Simmons. He'll be flying right seat.
The privilege of, I think, being part of this event, AOPA, the 85th anniversary, be able to fly along these incredible monuments. It's a once in a lifetime. I don't think any of us could imagine who would ever have the opportunity to do it again. And at Cirrus, we're all about the growth of aviation, more engagement, more participation. So anytime something like this happens, that we get to be a part of it, can keep growing this thing we love so much, that's what makes it so special.
We'll depart Frederick, fly down to the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, make a turn over the Smithsonian, and just have a fantastic time today.
Line up and wait, runway 23.
Air Boss, Safety 3, looking for takeoff clearance.
Safety 3, you are clear for takeoff.
Go. Guys, we're rolling. Follow that river.
That's where we turn down Independence.
Just to the right of
I see
Kennedy
it.
Center. Washington Monument, about 2 o'clock right now. Fly right down to Independence. Straight. This is awesome. Of the Lincoln Memorial right there. You're spot on 1,000 feet. You're perfect.
Welcome to the General Aviation flyover of Washington, D.C. in celebration of the 85th anniversary of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
About to do it, guys.
Cirrus has developed what they call its Vision Jet.
This is one of the most advanced technology airplanes in our group today.
It's hard to overstate the amount of passion these people have for their aircraft and what they do.
It really is. It's phenomenal.
Y'all got a great crowd down there, a lot of people watching.
There's DCA on our right. And if you want to rock your wings, now's that time.
Here we go.
There you go. 2.5 for Safety 3, on course.
Thank you, guys. We gave them a few wing rocks.
I'm glad to be a part of it, guys. It's awesome. Follow that airplane, runway 23, you are clear to land.
Number 2 behind him, Safety 3, clear to land.
Safety 3, flight, welcome back. How was it, guys?
One of the coolest things we've ever done, not gonna lie to you.
Just absolutely fantastic.
That's fun.
Oh, awesome. Hand flying this plane at 1,000 feet at 165 knots was absolutely
Simple.
a piece of cake.
Highlight of a lifetime in flying. What an
For
incredible
sure.
logbook entry.
Watching that Washington Monument go up under you, that left
Spot
wing
on,
was
right.
crazy.
There's so many ways to become engaged in flying, and this is one of them, but you saw so many different airplanes today. Lean in and go do it, and you will find a lifetime of reward from flying.
Anyway, that was great fun. I could talk about aviation for hours, but I think we have a couple of other people here who might want to say a few words. So thank you, thank you. I'm truly honored. Thank you, friends. Thank you, family. AOPA, Cirrus, and last but not least, B&A and the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next inductee is Captain Albert T. Glenn. Born with an airplane in his hand, Albert Glenn has had a lifelong love with aviation. He obtained his first wings on a Pan Am flight at age 3, then his pilot license in 1970, and has never looked back. Albert Glenn began his aviation career as an instrument and multi-engine flight instructor, Part 135 charter pilot, and in aircraft sales. Joining FedEx Corporation in 1974, he progressed as a data control clerk, master control supervisor, flight duty officer, chief pilot of flight operations, managing director of flight operations, and pilot hiring with the company. Amassing over 18,000 hours, Captain Glenn is qualified to pilot the Boeing 777, the MD-11, DC-10, and the Boeing 727 aircraft. While his personal professional accomplishments are impressive, Captain Glenn's true passion has been to help young people discover their aviation dreams. In 1987, he became director of the Negro Airman International Solo Flight Academy at Tuskegee, Alabama. This is a 2-week immersive program teaching young people to fly with a goal of soloing by the end of the program. In 1992, he helped in the development of the first Memphis Aviation Career Education Academy in partnership with the FAA, a multi-day event to expose middle and high school students to various careers in aviation field and practical application of STEM subjects. In 1995, Glenn supported Wooddale High School in Memphis as it became the state's only high school for specialized training in aviation. In 2018, he established the Lieutenant Luke Weathers Flight Academy in the Memphis area. The LWFA provides training and resources needed for young people to go from no experience to airline pilot qualifications within 3 years. Captain Glenn has worked continuously to make aviation education accessible and to position Memphis as an aviation center of excellence. In 2022, he helped establish the first 2-year Associate of Applied Science in Aviation Operations Technology at Southwest Tennessee Community College, and also served as chair of the Aviation Advisory Board at Western Michigan University. In April 2022, Captain Glenn was appointed to serve as the commissioner of the Memphis-Shelby County Board of Commissioners. For his exemplary service and contributions to aviation for Tennessee, for the nation, and for the world, Captain Albert T. Glenn is enshrined in the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame this 26th day of October 2024. Captain Glenn. Kana Barber will now come forth to install the medallion on him. This also is yours, along with the box that goes in, and now you may speak.
Oh, is that how it goes now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Hey, good evening, everyone. You know, I thought of a lot of words that I would love to say about everything that's occurred, but, you know, one thing that stuck out before I came up here and got a chance was to listen to what Major Luckadoo said when he came up, because that's very valuable. And that's, you know, when you think about all that's occurred and what I've been able to do, it's been because of him. It's been because of those like that have made a difference in our lives and provided us the opportunity to be able to do what we could do. So thank you to the board of directors for the Tennessee Hall of Aviation for giving me this opportunity to become part of an esteemed group of aviators. And I also want to say thank you to Thelma Rudd, our unofficial Memphis historian, Tuskegee Airmen Memphis chapter historian, and my son for nominating me. Thank you. Thank you for all that you've done. When I first found out about this, you know, I knew what they had done because they had asked me questions. I guess there's nothing that's real secret. But when I found out that it was going to happen, the first thoughts that came to my mind was really all of those that are here supporting me now. The fact that what I was able to do wasn't because of me as much as it was because of all of you who helped and participated. I know some of you said you hated to see me come because you knew I couldn't say no, but you knew that it was going to be a lot of work to make a difference in our community, and I appreciate you all for doing that. And so that was my first thought. And then after that, my next thought was, thank God for all of you. Thank God for allowing me to be here. Thank God for carrying me through this whole process. And then thank God for my parents. You know, my dad and mom came through a period starting in 1929 when they were born. They're 95 now. And I've listened to their stories, and I realized how strong their faith was. And between the two of them, they were a praying group. My mom was one who had a tendency to find these parables in the Bible to compare to, and you have to figure out how you fit in it. But there was one in particular that she kept putting on me. One was in Matthew 25 when it talks about the talent. For some reason, she kept working towards that one talent, like I was hiding something someplace. But the reality was I understood where she was going with that. And then with my dad being the same way, you know, he showed me what it meant to be a father. He showed me what it meant to be a man. He showed me what it meant to sacrifice. He too was at the end of World War II and followed and sacrificed so much for his country, and then had to endure all the challenges that went along with being a black man from the 40s through the 70s, through the 80s till now. And I can tell you, he did it with pride. He also taught me, which allowed me to teach my family, the value of diversity, the value of diverse thought, and the value that our country is made up of a lot of different cultures, and how important each culture is to how we as a community, how we as a country progress. And so it laid the foundation for my future. Trust me, I loved airplanes more than anything else, but it also gave me a sense that I had to be more than just what I loved. I had to do something more about what could I do that maybe I couldn't do what he did, but what he allowed me to do. And so when I think of Lucky, I think of all those that came before. It led me to those that sacrificed and what could I do even though I couldn't do like them. So my parents, and then there's my sister who came, and I have multiple sisters. My family supported me all the way around. But I had one sister in particular, my sister Carol, who, you know, you always have the oldest one and the youngest one. Well, she was that one that looked up to me, and no matter what I did, she was right behind me. And so my journey became one of having a sister who believed in what I was doing and joined in. I'm sure there's a number of OBAP members that know how much she cared about doing the work, and those that have been in the church with her, how much she cared about giving back to the community. But it's because of her that helped make my journey one that was important. And as I really began the next phase of deciding what I wanted to do, and I tell you, it really occurred when I decided as a senior in college, and to back up a little bit, I worked as an intern for Congressman Harold Ford Sr., and I told him, I said, I do not want to be a lawyer. I said, I know that's something that could make a difference, but I think I want to fly airplanes. And he said, go ahead and do it. He says, you know, follow your dreams. Follow something that you want to do that you can wake up every day. And during that time, I met a gentleman, Captain Carroll Waters, who was the first black pilot hired at FedEx. And when I first met Captain Waters, I mean, he seemed bigger than life. You guys know that consummate professional. He also had a cigar, but he was that professional, and he was a Vietnam vet, you know, one who had the Silver Star, one who eluded so much about what it meant to fight adversity and then to be able to be successful. And then the second is the person who taught me how to fly. Now, when I first started to try and decide I wanted to be a pilot, it wasn't exactly the easiest task. I mean, there were those who, when they heard me over the phone, they said, hey, I'll teach you, till they saw me. And I went through that cycle, and I met a gentleman named Reggie Boring, and Reggie was an Air Force instructor pilot. He taught the civilian side, and Reggie said, I don't care what color you are. I'll teach you how to fly. And that began that journey. But it also opened my eyes again to how important it is to understand the differences in culture and how important diversity is. And Reggie's not here with us, but, you know, that gave me my start. I know they only gave me 15 minutes. And, you know, needless to say, I can go on and on for a long time. I think anytime you give a pilot a mic, especially one that's had as many hours of talking on mic, that means I can tell a lot of stories. So I'll leave the stories away, but I'll give you a little bit about my journey. So FedEx, when Fred Smith started FedEx, and I'll give you this. I started, this is the Reader Digest version, trust me on all this, but I'm going to also give you the fact that I kind of ended up like Forrest Gump. I was always standing in the right place, listening and seeing things that were going on. So in 1974, I got hired by FedEx, and I spent the next 44 years. And I can tell you that what I was able to do really came from the culture of FedEx and what it did to instill in me, you know, leadership skills, the opportunity that if you could do the job and you were prepared for it and you met the requirements, you can move up in the company. And it gave me that freedom to do that. But what it also did was it helped foster more about that diversity. And so my journey ended up being a lot about what FedEx could do. As I say, a lot of others use what FedEx can do for you, but that's what it really came down to. The programs that we started with OBAP basically came back to what FedEx could do. And FedEx believed in what I was doing. They believed in what's important to the community, and I ended up being able to utilize that. And there's a lot of FedEx folks here, and every one of them played a part in my journey. If I could have my FedEx team that came here for this, could you stand up? Just let everybody see how important diversity and people are at FedEx. Thank you. The next is, and I wish I could tell everybody's name that's here, but the next is those that I work with, the Organization of Black aerospace professionals. Now, when I started with them, it was an organization of black airline pilots. It was all about pilots, trying to figure out how to keep black pilots in the industry, how to think about the future of the next group of pilots. But the real focus was how to keep the jobs that they had been given. You know, it was a task. A lot of them had gone to multiple airlines because they had to fight the discrimination that went along with it. And so when I became and joined their board of directors in 1985, they really entrusted somebody younger who came, and most black pilots were all military pilots. I was a civilian pilot, and they really didn't know anything about civilian pilots, but they took the opportunity to allow me to be part of that leadership team back then, and that started that cycle from Tuskegee all the way through. And what it did provide, and I'll tell all of those, that early group of pilots, that it gave me the ability to be able to trust in making good decisions and to work with people of all different backgrounds. You know, how to work with all the different airlines. But it also gave me the foundation to think, what does the future look like? So along with some other members of OBAP, it gave us the opportunity to start thinking about new programs. And all those new programs that we started, all were supported by FedEx. All of them helped guide that next generation. I can't tell you how many thousands of students that we've mentored and worked with, that we've taken through the ACE Academy, down to the National Flight Academy, to aerospace professionals in school, to the solo academies. But I can tell you that at the end of the day, those that started in those programs have gone on to make a difference in the industry. They become leaders in the industry. They become those that saw the sacrifice, but they also saw what it takes to give back to help the next generation. So if I could ask just the OBAP members, and to keep this short, the OBAP members along with the Luke Weathers Flight Academy, if you guys could all stand up for a moment and show everybody that have come here to participate with. Thank you. So I know, as you say, time. Don't pull me off the stage too quick. So the next groups was, and I'll make this real quick, was I started working with the Academy of Model Aeronautics. I had a love of airplanes, which included RC airplanes, and they also gave the opportunity to work with their education system. They also gave me the opportunity to manage some of the world teams, but it also became part of the overall package of being able to identify those who had a love for aviation, flying models to those who were able to go forward. And these programs with OBAP, a lot of them had an opportunity to participate and to utilize that to go ahead. And then as I get closer with the different groups, also with Team Memphis. So Team Memphis, for those who don't live in Memphis, Team Memphis is all the affinity groups, which is Women in Aviation, Taste of Aviation, National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees, the Blackhawks, OBAP. All these groups in one of the rare places that you find where we all came together. And since the early 90s, we've been working together to work with students with different programs and supporting each one of our programs. And it's a wonderful blessing to see when you realize that you can pull groups together that don't have a self-interest in their own group, but an interest in what's important for their community. Now, I've retired from FedEx in 2018, and I started the Luke Weathers Flight Academy with a gentleman named Captain Jeff Harrison, and we have been working through that. And I'm now at that point where I'm reaching, as I say, the second or third retirement, and I'm now starting a new life working with the Memphis-Shelby County Airport Authority. And I know that group is here, and I thank them very much for coming here and supporting. And really, when I saw the Nashville team, I wanted to jump up and say, Memphis, Memphis, Memphis. But you know, I want to thank the Hall of Fame. I want to thank all those who have come here to support being here. And I'm so overwhelmed by the fact that you've allowed me to be part of a group of of very well-known aviators. Just to be seen as an aviator amongst that group means a lot to me. And I'm sure it means a lot. I wish my parents could be here. I'm sure it means a lot to my dad. He lived that life where he was in air defense, and I think he always wanted to fly airplanes. He's the only person I know who's been dreaming about airplanes and has never flown one. And if probably it was reversed, he's proud of me being able to do it. He's proud of my son being able to do it, my nephews being able to do it, and my cousins. So I thank everybody for that. And in the end of this, what I like to say is that because of the value of my sister Carol Gentry, my son and I are creating a foundation to support aviators in the future, financially, mentoring, and education. And so our hope is that what we're able to put together from those who came before us will live on for many years to help those who need assistance. So thank everyone again for coming here. Thank God for your travels back safely, and thank the Hall of Fame for including me. Thank you.
Next inductee is Mike Loehle. Mike Loehle's aviation journey started as a teenager at Bowman Field in Louisville, Kentucky, gaining flight time in his father's Luscombe. In 1975, at age 16, he soloed a Cessna 150 before he was allowed to drive a car. He soon became interested in hang gliding and became involved in ultralights before that was even an aviation term. His early involvement in modifying and improving light aircraft started his lifelong career of designing and producing aircraft parts. Mike operated his business while still attending high school, first in his parents' basement and then from a T-hangar at Bowman Field. He later moved his operation to a grass strip in E.P. Tom Sawyer State Park, where he introduced thousands of park visitors to aviation. In 1981, he was awarded an Oshkosh Grand Champion Trophy and Outstanding Craftsmanship Award for his aeroplane design. He also won 1981 Most Innovation Modifications and 1982 Grand Champion at Sun and Fun. Also in 1982, he entered a business relationship with Sandra Burgess, who would become his wife in 1989. It would be a partnership that would last 35 years and a marriage of 28 years, only ending by Sydney's untimely passing in 2017. In 1984, they moved their operation to Wartrace, Tennessee, where they assumed ownership and operation of the former Ritz Propeller Company, while also continuing to produce kits for his Aeroplane XP design. In 1986, he designed the 5151, a 3/4 scale model of the venerable P-51, a design that would sell over 500 kits and were built, flown in 26 countries around the world. Additionally, he produced kits for the Sport Parasol as well as a collection of World War I replica aircraft. Next, Mike's lifelong experimentation with aircraft paints and finishes led him to develop Loehle Coatings, an innovative system for use on ultralight, home-built, and production aircraft. Mike Loehle has been a lifelong avid supporter of aviation and education and frequently helped with exposing students to aviation through high school programs, providing tours of the factory and various activities through the Beechcraft Museum in Tullahoma, Tennessee. In 2008, Mike was inducted into the Experimental Aircraft Association Hall of Fame in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. In recognition of his exemplary service and contributions to aviation in Tennessee, our nation, and to the world, Michael D. Loehle is enshrined in the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame this 26th day of October 2024. So, Mr. Mike Loehle. Mike's wife, Yuri, will accompany him in this award, and his son, John Loehle, will drape him with the medallion. So if they'll come forward. This is yours, and this is yours, and you may speak. Okay.
Let's see here. I'm going to start off with an actual picture up here, if this thing works right. Is this the right one? There we go. Before I even tell you about this picture, Ken had mentioned to me that one of the things that he would like is to not go over 45 minutes. So I brought a 45-minute timer just to make sure we don't do that. After being in aviation for probably close to 40 years, there's a lot of things that all of us up here can tell you about. So much the experiences that we get with aviation. But this photo to begin with kind of is a little different for a fellow that made his life in aviation. This is myself working on my dad's midget race car, and my sister's actually in the driver's seat. I guess she thought women could drive cars back then too, which they can. So, but kind of went from that into hang gliding, and I think Bob kind of mentioned an awful lot of things that maybe I should have kept some of those details under wraps so I could actually do my speech and follow it with it. But hang gliding was a real inexpensive way for a teenager to get into flying, and I stepped into it with the help of family and friends. Especially my family has always been there for us in any of the endeavors we've done in aviation. My aunt sitting here with me probably even loaned me the money for this red, white, and blue hang glider at one point. When a broke teenager, it's not a lot of money to buy a flying machine. So this was a picture of my CAP solo encampment. Back then, they really did do all that dumping buckets on your head and trimming your T-shirt and so on. And it was pretty impressive recently to find that I still have that T-shirt wadded up in the shop. So. The one thing that I've kind of got to explain to so many of the people, all along my family, as I said earlier, has been there for me. My Uncle Dennis took a snotty-nosed 16-year-old brat to Oshkosh in 1976. Little did I realize that my entire life would change after that journey to Oshkosh. Dennis was not real happy with me because I had a kind of a cranky attitude and wasn't really interested in too much going on, even though it was aviation, except when I watched a fellow named John Moody flying Icarus II, the first hang glider, powered hang glider to make it to Oshkosh. I actually got to watch John do his inverted flight, and from then on I was hooked on flying ultralights. I went back home and started building ultralights, an Easy Riser in particular, a biplane. But the stability on a flying wing like John was flying and so many of us, the CG envelope was a little over about 1.5 inches total for the center of gravity change. So it didn't take me long to realize that listening to my dad was a good thing. And he explained to me that if I put a tail on that thing, I'd be light years ahead, and I probably wouldn't get killed flying it. So I actually got into manufacturing parts for Easy Risers. And here's some of them. This is the very first prototype that was taxiing down between the T hangars at Bowman Field. And one of our actual in-flight photos. No GoPros back then, so this is a 35 millimeter taken, but a lot of fun, a lot of design work, I spent 24/7 dreaming of how to make anything we were working with better and safer. This was the first debut of any product we ever produced. This was 1979, as you can see, at Tullahoma. And it was kind of unusual that I debuted there, and lo and behold, I ended up in 1984 moving to the Tullahoma area, and all our flight testing from then on was done at the Tullahoma airport, out of all the airports in the country. This was, as Bob said, 1981. We took the first shiny painted ultralight to Oshkosh. A lot of grumbling folks from older competitors want to know how I got that shiny paint on that airplane, but a lot of them wanted to know the details, and their airplanes came the following year with shiny paint. I was kind of known for the wet look when it came to paint, and I always dabbled with it, but it was something that later on in life would become a staple in our industry, as far as being able to service products and everything from RV-10s all the way down to ultralights and some jet fighters. This airplane was actually started 2 weeks before Oshkosh. Those stripes you see on there, hand laid out by several people on top and bottom of biplane wings, but that was built in 2 weeks and taken to Oshkosh. This is a picture here of my wife, Sandy, first wife, and really did I realize how much my life was going to change when we met. Sandy laid in her hospital bed telling people that she really didn't like us when we first met. But she had known people like Bob Hoover and Chuck Yeager. Little old me was just fooling with ultralights. But I actually coaxed her into leaving Kentucky Fried Chicken's home office. She was a dress-wearing executive secretary for a vice president there, and next thing I know, she was running the front end of an ultralight operation in Tom Sawyer State Park. But her passion for flying was as strong as mine. She had built 2 airplanes and test flew them before I met her. She was actually American Airlights Eagle and flight instructor and dealer. There's a picture of her when she was flying her Eagle. Some of the early ultralight people in this room remember the American Airlights Eagle. That was out on her sod farm. That she was way out in a sod farm out in Jefferson County, and very few people would come visit her because it was so far out. On the other hand, I had over 3,000 people in a state park in the afternoon, and all I did was I wanted to be around drill presses and machinery. I really didn't like people. Sandy was the people person. Honestly, when I look back, we would have never reached all the areas and around the world with kit airplanes if Sandy hadn't come on board. She followed up every lead we ever got. All I cared about was going and testing a product at the airport and having fun doing that test flying and putting it in production. In 1984, as Bob said, we purchased Ritz Propeller Company. Little did I realize at 26 years old, God just laid something in front of me that only God could do, to be able to buy a piece of property with an airstrip. And at that time, we didn't realize it, but it was the world's largest wooden propeller company. We were making 50 propellers a day, multi-lamination. I just thought we were making a lot of sawdust and making props, but in doing so, propellers were getting to where most of the people in the industry wanted a composite propeller. I was not interested in going into a composite world. I was more interested in airplanes. So on a trip back from Florida, I kept thinking about the times that I'd been able to hang out with Paul Poberesny, the founder of EAA. And Paul used to tell us that all we were doing was making ultralights that would turn into light airplanes as time went on. I kept trying to figure out what I was going to do to pay for the facility that I just bought. The mortgage payment was $5,000 a month, and that's pretty hefty when you're 26 years old, trying to figure out how to do that every month. So the idea came about of building an affordable, simple-to-fly P-51 replica. And I drove home from Lakeland, Florida with a plastic model in my hand driving a school bus. When I got out of that school bus, I pitched the idea to my dad, and there were a lot of adjectives I hadn't heard my dad use before. The following week, Dad had taken a couple of balsa wood models, plans for them, a PT-19 and a P-51 Mustang, and laid them on top of each other. And he admitted that I might have a marketing idea that would be light years ahead. So we went from a flying lawn chair biplane to a cantilevered, tapered cantilever, retractable landing gear airplane, flying with a whopping 46-horse Rotax engine out of the ultralight area. So it was quite an exciting time. This airplane was an experiment in our paint. This was a kit prototype, and all the parts in our kits were all cut and pre-numbered. Even though it was a wooden airplane, we treated it as if it was a metal airplane with all the parts numbered. In doing so, this airplane was 1988, and as far as I know, it was the first clear-coated airplane to ever hit the air shows, Oshkosh and Sun and Fun. And back then, everybody said you didn't need clear coat on an airplane. Now it's industry standard, even over vinyl graphics. But I've always played with paint. My aunt here, Eileen, she kind of was the one responsible for me to get into painting model cars and bicycles. Not my dad, not my uncles. My aunt taught me to paint. Here's kind of a takeoff of the Christian Eagle, the way they laid out their biplane in the late 80s. We were doing the same thing with our Mustang. This was a Czechoslovakian Walter Micron airplane that was done. It was kind of our last. It had 11 composite parts, including a ballistic parachute mounted in the top of it in front of the windscreen. And it was flown to Lakeland, Florida. This is a photo shoot down at Lakeland of a friend of mine that runs the Gainesboro Airport, Jim Young, and he built one called, took our airplane and made a KW909. It was part ME109 and an FW190, but it really kind of made for some real good photo shoots when we get out with these airplanes. This is just another shot of them. If you see in there, there's P-40. Our P-40 airplane is in there. It was basically one of our airplanes dolled up to look like a World War II P-40 Flying Tiger. And this is a photo shoot that EAA took years ago. And whenever I tell people, whenever I taxied in this airplane at a pancake breakfast, I can pretty well guarantee I was going to park up next to a Citation. We weren't going to be out in left field with this thing. It drew a lot of attention, and it allowed a lot of pilots that were low-time pilots to fly, quote, the Walter Mitty Warbird. And in doing so, it also helped us pay for that mortgage payment that was hanging over our head. And I guess that's pretty much that. What I want to end up here quickly will be the fact that my relatives were really the ones that stood behind us through thick and thin. My uncle sitting here, Stuart, was always there to do tool and die work for anything we needed as far as ultralight parts, aluminum tubes, anything we built. He was there when it came to reduction units for the engines. But I always had support from my family. My dad came to work for me in 1983, gave up a foreign car business as far as a job, and I'd heard he was giving that up many times before, but from then on, that's when I met my dad. We worked side by side virtually 5 days a week, so that was a blessing that only God could come up with. I look back at so many of the things that went on in my life. They always tell you, find your passion and make that your livelihood. That's kind of something that's always tossed around. I'm living a witness to that. My love affair looking out the window at Wagner High School in Louisville was watching Cessna 150s in the pattern at one of the busiest airports in the country. As I left the high school, I became a line boy and ramp tramp and a mechanic. Was doing 100 hours at 17 years old on Cessna 150. So I really got a background in GA aviation, which helped us do a lot of marketing when it came to the experimental and kit plane field. But family and friends were always there for me. The airplane I mentioned, it was built in 2 weeks. Many of my customers jumped in to help us do that airplane. One in particular ran a music store, so every part on that airplane that could be polished with rouge like you would a musical instrument was done that way. When he delivered those parts, he looked like Al Jolson. I didn't know who it was standing at the door. He was covered in so much polishing compound and rouge, but it was really even needed a paint booth to paint this airplane in a hurry. Vocational school in J-Town showed up, and next thing I know, I'm painting the airplane under the gun in a vocational school. So I guess where I'm going with this is God's always opened the doors. If, like a little kid, if I knocked more than once or twice, he pretty well heard me and was allowed me to move on with the aviation dream. But I can honestly tell young people especially, if you've got a passion for anything, whether it's aviation, cars, laboratory work, focus on your dream. You can make your living out of it. And in turn, you can service a lot of people around the world if you just stay focused on that dream. And that's pretty much all I've got. And my new wife, Yuri, here has been a blessing into my life. Family friend and retired neonatal doctor. So I joke with people that I married up twice. So it's been a blessing. So thank you very much. And I'm honored to be inducted into the Hall of Fame here. And Ken, thank you very much for all the work you've done on this, and Bob too. So thank you all.
This last induction is a posthumous one. Captain Rosemary Bryant Mariner. Rosemary Bryant Mariner was born in 1953 in Harlingen, Texas, to Air Force pilot Cecil Bryant and World War II Navy nurse Constance Boylan. Her father perished in a 1956 aircraft accident. She began flying at age 15, taught by men who had been World War II WASP instructors. Rosemary was the first female accepted into Purdue University's aeronautics program, completing her BS at 19. She was in the first class of women to enter Navy flight training, earning her wings in 1974, and was assigned to VC-2 at NAS Oceana, transitioning to the A4L Skyhawk in 1975, the first military woman to fly tactical jets. In 1976, she moved into the A7E Corsair II attached jet in NWC China Lake. In 1980, she married native Tennessee Navy pilot Tommy Mariner, adopting Norris, Tennessee as her home. She was the first female Navy pilot assigned to sea duty aboard an aircraft carrier in 1982, earning Surface Warfare Officer designation and carrier qualifying in 1983. She was a Navy jet flight instructor in VT-23 in 1984, then flew the A7E in VA-122 as a Fleet Readiness Squadron instructor, advancing to the rank of commander. On 12 July 1990, she became the commanding officer of VAQ-34, the first woman to command an aviation unit. Her squadron provided electronic warfare training for Navy ships in preparation for Operation Desert Storm. Following Desert Storm in 1991, Rosemary, as president of the Women Auxiliary Aviators Association, led a successful campaign on Capitol Hill to repeal combat exclusion laws which restricted women's roles in military service. She attended the National War College, earning a master's, and served on the staff of the Joint Chiefs, advancing to the rank of Navy captain. Her final Navy assignment was teaching joint military strategy at the NWC. In 1997, she retired, moving to Norris, Tennessee with Tommy and daughter Emily. Rosemary remained active in military service issues and taught military history at the University of Tennessee for 15 years, while a resident scholar at the Center of the Study of War and Society. Rosemary logged over 700 civilian hours, was instrument rated, a CFII, and a commercial pilot. She also logged over 3,500 accident-free hours in 15 different military aircraft. Rosemary passed away 24 January 2019, honored by an all-female Navy FA-18F flyover at her funeral. For her exemplary service and contributions to aviation for Tennessee, our nation, and the world, Captain Rosemary Bryant Mariner is enshrined in the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame, this 26th day of October, 2024. And receiving this for her is her husband, Tommy Mariner. And here is her medallion. And you may speak, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and particularly Hall of Fame inductees. I am retired Navy Commander Tommy Mariner, and I was Rosemary's wingman and husband for 40 years. 17 of my 22 years of service, we were married. Before Rosemary and I came back to Tennessee, where we raised our daughter Emily together. As Lucky said, Rosemary and I were not warriors. We were citizen soldiers. Our plan was always to come home, rejoin the local community, and help build lives together with other people in our state and our hometowns. Rosemary began flying at age 15. She fell in love with aviation from the books of Ernest Gann. She was a member of the first class of female naval aviators in 1973, and she actually became sort of the cover girl, and she was on the cover of the book about their time in the Navy, a book by Beverly Weintraub, Wings of Gold, which came out in 2021. In her 24 years of service, they're marked by a number of firsts, and I'm going to go over some of those with you. Rosemary was the child of a Air Force, formerly Army pilot. His wife, Connie, was a Navy nurse in World War II, and Rosemary began flying at 15. She heard about a good program of flight instruction at Purdue University and became their first female student, graduating at the age of 19. Part of the reason she graduated so quick was the Navy announced a new program. Women were going to get to fly. Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, the CNO, came out with that message in 1972 in November, and Rosemary jumped on that, tested out of a bunch of her classes, and became one of the first 8 women selected for that program. They went to Pensacola. 7 of them began flying, and 6 of them obtained their wings in 1974. However, the Navy would not let Rosemary fly what she wanted to, which were jets. So she became a prop pilot, showed up at VC2, but she was very lucky. VC2 had a bunch of A4s and not many jet pilots. Her CO, Ray Lambert, was a black aviator at the time, an A6 pilot, very rare in the Navy, and he put Rosemary down as his next jet pilot. She went off to jet training in 1974 after being in the back seat of airplanes a bunch. And by 1975, she was checked out in jets, and in January of 1976, became the first woman to fly a single-seat attack jet, the A4, in this case Lima, landing and actually had a hydraulic failure on her very first flight. Handled that airplane well, brought it back, and flew into history from that point on. In 1976, she transitioned to the frontline A7E, an attack aircraft, becoming the first female weapons test pilot at the Naval Weapons Center in China Lake. She was trained in a squadron, VA 174, led by John McCain. In fact, one of her flight instructors was here today, introduced himself to me. And she went off to China Lake, had a real good opportunity to fly at China Lake, written good orders, and her first jobs were flying in F-86 old Air Force fighter aircraft that were being converted into drone aircraft. Rosemary became the lead pilot for the development of the QF-86, and then she began flying projects in the A-7E, in this case, an ISM-D, an infrared sensing missile. Rosemary went over to our sister squadron on base, VX-5, and became the safety officer in VX-5, and took quite a bit of ribbing from her squadron mates when she became selected as Glamour Magazine's Working Woman of the Year for 1982. The lowest priced woman worker at that time amongst those people that were interviewed on television. Then in 1984, she went over to the USS Lexington, and there her captain, Jim Ryan, gave her the opportunity to carrier qualify finally, something the Navy had denied her for the first 10 years of her Navy flying. He also gave her the opportunity to go off and finally get to fly jets off an aircraft carrier. In this case, a TA-4J, which she logged her first landings in a jet on the 10th of May in 1983. Her landing signal officer was famous LSO Bug Roach. She next went over to VT-23, a training squadron, the largest jet squadron in the Navy at the time, became the maintenance officer, transitioned that squadron from Navy maintenance to civilian maintenance, and she taught air-to-air gunnery, and after she had been shot at in VC-2, and she also taught formation. And she got to fly a couple of times aboard ship in my back seat. Rosemary next went to VA-122, a squadron which she had been denied access to for her initial training in the A-7. They didn't want her as an instructor in A-7s for a long time. But finally in 1986, things changed. The CO of the squadron changed, and Rosemary became a jet instructor teaching the new fleet pilots how to bomb in the A-7E. It was her fourth tour in the airplane. She was selected there for commander and then command of a squadron. She went off to VAQ-34 in Point Mugu, California. On the 12th of May, the 12th of July, 1990, she assumed command. And you can see her and her squadron there in the lower right-hand picture, and then Rosemary in a PAO photo there on the left. VAQ-34 did fleet training, and she thought she was pretty special, but of course, a week and a half after she took command, one of her airplanes had a uncommanded ejection. Both pilots thrown out into the air. The airplane landed in the Los Padres forest, started a forest fire, and Rosemary's name was on the front page of the LA Times. You don't want that if you're in the Navy. And so Rosemary, however, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and suddenly nobody cared about that little forest fire. And Rosemary, after Desert Storm, was the subject of a CNN special, and they began to exert pressure on Congress to change the law. Clearly, 41,000 women had deployed to Desert Storm. They knew they could do the job. So Rosemary led the fight to go to Congress and change the law. Admiral Elmo Zumwalt had told her back in 1983, you got to change the law. The Navy's never going to change. So she got a lot of good publicity, a lot of help from a number of men and women throughout the country. And in July, they managed to get the law changed in Congress, and finally it was signed in December by the president. They also invented a little group of people that got together and talked about the Presidential Commission, whether women should be flying. Well, Rosemary didn't think that was right, so she led the fight to get that commission's report put on the back shelf. She didn't really get it put on the back shelf. Bill Clinton got elected, and they didn't care. So Bill and Hillary opened up naval aviation and all of service aviation to women flying in combat. And so Rosemary went off to be a school teacher at the National War College. She went back to the Joint Staff. Finally, when we retired in 1995, I retired in 95, she retired in 97 to raise our daughter. She taught at the University of Tennessee, taught a military history program. She helped out in the community. Actually, I became an ROTC instructor. She inspected my unit, and she was a speaker for women policy all over television and the radio. Finally, in 2017, the Women's Aviation International honored Rosemary and her class as pioneers for the starting of military aviation for women. And in 2022, Emily and I got to represent Rosemary when she as an individual was inducted for changing the law and opening combat to women. That was kind of ironic because at her death in 2019, at her funeral, an F-18 flyover was flown by 4 FA-18F aircraft, all flown by 2 women, front and back, all of them combat veterans, all of them owing their combat opportunity to Rosemary. The final honor that she got was one that would have really her mother would have really loved, a Navy nurse. The third VA facility ever named after a woman was named after Rosemary. Congresswoman Brownlee from her former district in Southern California offered her name up, and Congress passed that. President Biden signed the law, and Emily and I got to go out and honor her name being put on the door of the VA clinic in Ventura, California. And this is a group of 40 women that showed up at Rosemary's funeral, Sisters of the Air, who she shared a lot of years of flying and arguing about women in the military, remembering back to her Black CO in VC2. Captain Lambert had told Rosemary the most important thing for you being successful in the Navy is going to be your efforts to mentor people and to work with other people. That networking and mentoring were keys to her success. And also, those are the people that she called up when she wanted to start putting pressure on Congress to change the law. These were the people that she had talked to, mentored with, been in squadrons with, flown with, and they showed up and helped her on Capitol Hill in the summer of 1991. And finally, down in the bottom corner, Emily and I went out to San Diego. And one of the things that inspired Rosemary when she first started dreaming of flying, right next door was the Naval Air Station at Miramar, California. A4s, F8s, F4s taking off, the sound of those airplanes going over her house. She used to babysit her 2 sisters, Libby and Linda, by dragging them down into the canyon, up the mesa sides, and sitting on the side of the runway, watching airplanes taking off and landing. 40 years later, Emily and I got to dedicate a little plaque up on Mount Soledad overlooking Miramar Naval Air Station and Rosemary's childhood home on Lodi Street in San Diego. Actually, I was prepared to, if anybody's got any questions about Rosemary's career, I'd be glad to answer those. You'd have to yell out pretty loud, and it's a late evening, so I won't take up any more of your time, but just on behalf of Rosemary and our daughter, Emily, I'd like to thank you for this award, and good luck to the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Give a big hand to all these inductees. It's been a good night. You'll have an opportunity for pictures when we're through, to talk to them and to associate some more. Don't forget the silent auction. It's still going on, and when I get through, I'll tell you it'll be closing 15 minutes from right now, whenever that is. So I hope everybody's had a good time, and we hope and pray that you have a safe trip home, and we hope and pray that we can continue to benefit aviation and life itself. I'll close with this. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up, the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And while with silent lifting mind I've trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. You all have a good night, and try to come back and see us again next year. Thank you so much.